Welcome, ladies, gentlemen. This is the event we have all been waiting for. This is the BSC versus ETH debate. I am Benton with CoinTelegraph. I'm going to be hosting and moderating the debate tonight. To my right, you have Spinning Nichols from BSC and Blizzard.money. Ogle is below him from BSC Gemz. To the left of me, you have DeFiDad, who is advisor to Zapper.fi and Fourth Revolution Capital, and Evan Van Ness, the Ethereum expert and content creator. Welcome tonight. We're going to be diving into many different topics, controversial topics that are about both chains. We're going to have great discussions. We hope you guys are excited. And we're going to get right into our opening remarks. Each person is going to have 2 minutes. The way this debate will be structured is each side will have 1.5 minutes, which will be strictly timed to make concise arguments for each topic that we bring up tonight. So let's go ahead and start off. DeFiDad, if you want to give your opening remarks here, just give us 2 minutes. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you love Ethereum so much.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm normally just classify myself as a DeFi super user, but I've also worked at Zapper for the last year. I'm now an advisor to Zapper, and I'm just about to start working for Fourth Revolution Capital, which is a DeFi-focused fund. But yeah, I mean, God, to put it in a nutshell, I've been working on or like with Ethereum projects for about 4 years now. I also pay actually very close attention to BSC projects, and I think my thesis is less about Ethereum being better, but I do recognize that we have, I think, obviously more innovation going on just because there's that much more economic activity. The on-chain numbers sort of speak to that, or I think they clearly speak to that. Yeah, hopefully we'll get to talk more about the differences, because my goal is, I think, more to highlight the differences so that people are educated on all the different projects that you can get involved in on both Ethereum and BSC.
Excellent. Nichols, why don't you tell us your opening remarks here? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, Spin Nichols, founder of Blizzard.money. Before that, I was a community member over at Beefy.finance, and then I help at BCS Gemz with Ogle as well. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I run a project on BSC, but I really enjoy the community. I think it's more positive in nature than some of the Ethereum community. Obviously, the cheaper TX fees, the speed. That's pretty basic stuff.
Excellent. All right. And we're going to shift over to Evan Van Ness. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and you have 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Oh, Evan, you're muted.
Looks like we need to unmute there.
I know how computers work. I'm Evan Van Ness. I founded a newsletter called Week in Ethereum News. That's weekinethereumnews.com. And I like to tweet polemics on the old Twitter. That's about it for me. I live in Texas, so I like to say things like howdy when I'm opening my remarks. I think Ethereum is great, and I think the whole point of Ethereum is that it's a platform to build decentralized applications. And, blockchains can be accretive things, as in value add and win-win for everything. And I think BSC in some ways has been that by Binance. I do think that, users should be clear that what they're getting is a platform controlled by Binance. And, it's pretty much not decentralized at all. But there are sometimes higher rewards available there. And, as long as you understand that higher risk goes quite along with higher rewards, then that's the risk you take, right?
Excellent. And we will shift this over last but not least. Ogle, have yourself a little bit of an introduction and tell us why you love BSC so much.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say first off that I'm sorry for not being on the video. I lost my mask like 10 minutes prior to the stream starting, and so that's just how it is. Yeah, so I founded BSC Gemz back in August, whenever the Binance Smart Chain first came out. This is after having spent some time on the Ethereum network, and also spending time just working with ETH, and prior to that BTC for about the past 9 or 10 years. BSC for me is mostly all the good things that I would hope to have out of the Ethereum network, with a couple of drawbacks that I think Evan was alluding to. And so the reason I love BSC, though, is you have virtually all of the good things about ETH. You have the ability to create projects of your own, if you like. You have the ability to have access to capital and interesting ideas that you might not otherwise have typically. You have a lot of kind of cool stuff in a future that like will have a place in a future financial ecosystem, this decentralized financial ecosystem. But you have it at a speed and at a price and an accessibility that you don't get on the Ethereum chain. And so this enables not just somewhat wealthy first world, quote unquote, countries to get involved. It allows other people in other parts of the world to get involved and to better their lives. And I really, really appreciate that part about it. The second thing that I really appreciate as someone who runs the channel BSC Gemz is that the community that I experienced on the Ethereum side is very different than the one that I experienced on the BSC side. It's just, and I'm not saying one's better or worse, but they're different. And the one on the BSC side works better for my demeanor, I should say, which is kind of a relaxed, kind of a nice guy, versus a little more kind of serious and hardcore, which is what you get a little bit more on the Ethereum side.
All right. It looks like everyone has made their opening statements. We appreciate you guys with the brief introductions. Now let's get into it. The first topic for tonight is going to be about leadership. We're going to spend 6 minutes total per topic here, giving each side 1.5 minutes each per person. So we're going to start this off with bringing this over to the Ethereum side. So let's talk about it. Leadership on both chains, whether you want. As we know, Vitalik Buterin is the figurehead of Ethereum, and then Binance has CZ as their figurehead. So let's start off tonight with the question: who would you rather have at the helm of your blockchain? Let's hand this over to the Ethereum guys first. Who would like to step up?
Yeah, I totally disagree. I mean, I don't think Vitalik is the figurehead of Ethereum by any means. It is a decentralized ecosystem. I think it's a challenge that 2 million followers on Twitter and other people don't. But Vitalik was one of the founders of Ethereum. He is a very bright guy and has a lot of good ideas. And he's come up with some great ideas, but he's really, frankly, not very involved in the governance of Ethereum. One thing that he was involved in, which was his idea 3 years ago, was now known as EIP 1559, which is transaction fee, a different type of fee market, which will hopefully involve a better user experience for users, just more predictable gas fees, and it will also mean about half of the gas used in the transaction, which will, have some interesting effects on the total supply of Ethereum.
Excellent. BSC guys, which one of you guys want to jump in first here?
I'm happy to, unless Nichols, you want to pick up. You okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So I think that it is indisputable that at least on the BSC side, the CZ is the figurehead. He owns the company. He founded and owns the company that deployed the Binance Smart Chain system itself. So obviously he's the one. He's also very outspoken. He's happy to start problems once in a while. But he's also seems to be a pretty nice, easygoing guy in some other ways. And so I think that the leadership of the Binance side, in my view, is superior for this becoming a dominant chain. And the main reason for that is that, first off, there is a leader, which to Evan's point, maybe Vitalik is not per se like the leader or the figurehead, the 100% figurehead. There is a leader who has shown his ability to grow something, his ability to manage something through bear and bull markets, his ability to motivate people, thousands of people to work for him, many of them not for a ton of money. He's been able to take the best parts of other systems and learn from those, and then deploy things that are better for the rest of the people than just the wealthy folks, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, he's, in short, he's able to actually lead. And so from my perspective, leadership is a very clear winner on the BSC side.
Excellent. And DeFiDad, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, I think this actually cuts to the core of knowing the differences so you can choose basically which ecosystem is a better fit for you. And I think actually a lot of what Ogle said, I agree with in terms of like who CZ is as a leader. The problem for me is that I want to grow DeFi, we need decentralization. And I think that decentralization ultimately becomes a spectrum. So without going into like how decentralized is Ethereum, how decentralized is BSC, I think it's unequivocal, or we know based on just the number of validators that Ethereum is more decentralized. And so that requires the personality that we have in Vitalik. We have a very sort of selfless, high EQ sort of personality. And, it took a lot, obviously, to launch the network. It takes a lot of brilliance to be able to create what is Ethereum's network today. But that being said, I do see the difference in leadership style with CZ, where he is more of a trust me, I will take care of you, I know what's best. And I'm not suggesting either one is better. I think it's interesting we get to sort of watch it as an experiment. I obviously lean towards Ethereum's leadership style with Vitalik, and yeah, I'd kind of leave it at that.
Excellent. And Nichols, your thoughts and opinions here.
Yeah, so I agree with both points that Vitalik's a very selfless guy, and that works very well in a extremely decentralized blockchain. That's the type of personality you need. You need to work with a community and listen to thoughts and of your community, and but at the same time, CZ knows how to monetize products. He's a very good marketer. He has a large social following, has built this massive crypto bank basically, and I think a lot of BSC people put their trust in that. They're users of Binance, so they just naturally are comfortable with Binance Smart Chain.
All right, we heard it from both sides. We're going to move on to the next topic: security. All right, folks, we're getting into security. We want to figure out the evolutions moving forward for Ethereum and BSC. Which chain is safer, and how are users incentivized to participate in a DeFi ecosystem when it's full of rug pulls or exploits? We're going to start this one off on the BSC side. Guys, which one of you guys want to jump in first?
Nichols, if you don't mind, just so I can get my connection issue sorted here. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so part of what appealed to me with Binance Smart Chain at the beginning was the idea of this, semi-walled garden, to where if you had some massive or medium rug pull or exploit, that centralization effect could come into play and resolve that, which at the beginning was really nice. I mean, we had a couple exploits of wine swap, and we had a Venus issue that that's where Mothership Binance stepped in and was able to recover user funds. Running a project and being part of a Telegram group, you do see a lot of users that don't necessarily know how to check themselves with smart contracts and so on. And I think that's a big issue with DeFi, and having that, semi-walled garden gives them comfort in operating in the space. Now, it seems that Binance has had less of a approach to that lately. We'll see if user pushback, makes that come back around. But That's what appeals to me from Binance Smart Chain, and compared to ETH. You don't get that type of course you don't get it because it's decentralized, but it's actual theft, whether it be an exploit or a rug pull or whatever by a project. I think that's what appeals to a large user base in Binance Smart Chain.
That's great. Evan, what are your thoughts about the security of each chain? Which chain is safer at the end of the day? What are you seeing?
Well, I think it's pretty unequivocal that right now all of the hacks are happening on Binance Smart Chain and not on Ethereum. Like, you can literally go to rect.net, which is Julian Bouteloup's DAO project, and you can literally see that like there basically hasn't been a single attack on ETH in like 2 months because they all moved to BSC. And, I think that's a little unfortunate. And my understanding is that, Binance has not stepped in and gotten any of those people's money back. And to be fair, like, to me, that sort of means that you have the worst of both worlds, where you have a centralized product, which also so you have the disadvantages of centralization, but then the hackers have all gotten away with it, like in the past month, as far as I understand. So you have all of the benefits or all of the disadvantages of decentralization as well. Also, one small point, which I haven't seen anyone make anywhere, but since BSC copied Geth entirely on Ethereum client, they inherit all of Ethereum's, well, at least Geth's technical issues, and they have not, as far as I know, fixed a spam attack issue that was fixed in the last hard fork called EIP 2929. So literally, someone could probably DOS the network to death with, unless they fix this, with like, $10 an hour if they know how to do the attack. So they should really fix that ASAP.
You bring up a good point. Ogle, do you have thoughts as to which chain is safer and why? How are users incentivized in this DeFi ecosystem today?
Yeah, I think that actually Evan made a a good point. He said that after all the exploits, quote, moved to BSC, that means they were somewhere else before that. They were on Ethereum. And what it is the very, very high cost of ETH gas makes it more exciting, or I guess cheaper, to come over to somewhere else and do exploits. And I remember back in August, September, October, November, December, we had hundreds of thousands, millions of wallets actually were doing just fine. And then come January, we saw that AnySwap was launching on the BSC side. And I was like, oh Christ, here we go. As soon as that happens, there's a way for these folks to come from Ethereum over here and steal money, do exploits, and then take it back over to Ethereum where they're from in the first place, which is exactly what happened, because then there was a bridge that was not going straight through Binance. And so I think that the fact that there are issues that occur in BSC right now doesn't mean that BSC per se is less secure. It just means that's where the exploits are happening right now. Just like prior to that, they were happening on Ethereum. All last week, I was on KuCoin's chain checking it out. The KuCoin, and basically 99.99% of things on there are just rugs. And so I mean, it's just people will go where it's cheap and easy to do an exploit. But as Nichols was saying, there have been situations in the past where people were stopped at the gate. They were not stopped at the gate so much by Binance, but they were stopped at the gate in a few other ways via other platforms, with the exclusion of AnySwap, who refuses to participate in that process. So, I mean, to me, it seems very clear to me that BSC is more secure if even one project has an exploit that is recovered, which it has. And I can cite many. Ethereum, I can't think of any.
And DeFiDad, what do you think here? Which chain is safer and why?
Yeah, I think so. The difference between the two chains has been called out here. With BSC, I think of it as you sort of inherit this benevolent dictator, again, like the community knows that CZ is in charge, and again, like there's a lot of like upside to that, but it is a double-edged sword. You have to put your trust into this one very powerful person. On the flip side of that, with Ethereum, when we have a rug pool, unless you have bought decentralized insurance, you have to basically just own that decision. And I want to call out, those are two very different types of people, and they sometimes get mixed up too between using both chains. So if you are, you will notice that people own their accountability when they are not experiencing a rug pull. But then when one happens, we do find some screaming for help. And I think it just takes time and experience to know the difference. I would rather bask in the fact that I know that I'm working in a more censorship-resistant blockchain like Ethereum versus BSC. But I think the benefit for some users on BSC has been to look to the Binance mothership to sort of shut off the bridge and prevent like a hacker from exiting the system with funds. So yeah, that's my take on it.
We bring up some great concerns about the security, because I think that's going to be a huge key for both the evolutions of both chains. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens here moving forward. We are going to move into our next topic tonight: speed and scalability. So one of the big things that really separates the differences between Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, as we all know, is the transactions and speed. So how does each chain plan to maintain transaction speed while scaling user growth? Let's start this off with DeFiDad. Why don't we hear from you on the Ethereum side?
Yeah, so Ethereum currently is in it's in like an inflection point, because we have a number of layer 2 solutions that are working but are just launching. And I want to call out the difference that a true L2 is more like an elevated train above a city. You're still, inheriting the security, the decentralization of the Ethereum or Manhattan community, but you're obviously able to transact at cheaper costs and faster transaction speeds. The problem is right now is there's insatiable demand to transact in DeFi. And so over the past year, we've seen there are those that have remained on Ethereum and not touched another chain. There are those that began to experiment with BSC. There are those that have chosen to use BSC. End of day, I think depending on what is your preference, do you need the speed and basically next to zero cost to transact today with some of the downsides we've called out about BSC? If that's your preference, BSC is the right choice for you. Otherwise, for me, I choose more of the cornucopia of new opportunities and innovations on Ethereum, but I also choose to pay higher transaction fees and have to be a little more patient. Long term, though, the question is, what happens when Ethereum has equivalent transaction speeds, the same low costs? We'll find out what users do in the next few years. My bet is that Ethereum wins that long-term race.
Very good. Ogle, let's hear your thoughts on the speed and scalability topics.
Yeah, I think that the speed and scalability as things are right now is really kind of, there's really no comparison. Obviously, BSC is significantly faster. Obviously, it's significantly more scalable as it is. As DeFiDad mentioned, Ethereum 2.0, quote unquote, which is theoretically going to come at some point in the next couple of years, that may solve some of those issues. I think the problem that ETH 2.0 is going to run into, or could run into, which I would be fearful of, is that in a couple of years, that's not where these ecosystems are. Like the BSC and Matic and all the other side or L2s are not where they are now in 2 years. And so ETH is basically 2 years behind trying to catch up to where things are today in that case. And so I'm not so sure. I think that probably in a couple of years, if the price goes down, the speed goes up on ETH 2.0. I mean, that'll be fantastic. That'll be a lot better situation. But these L2s and the side chains at that point will have, I imagine, innovated well beyond that to even cheaper, even faster.
And Evan, I see you chomping at the bit here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on each chain and kind of where you see the scaling and user growth happening on Ethereum.
Yeah, look, speed and scalability are sort of different issues. I think the first thing to say is that, the idea that BSC has innovated is like obviously wrong, right? The BSC is not innovated at all. They have literally forked Geth, and they haven't even kept up. As I said, like, I'm pretty sure that the basically life and death, if somebody decides to spam the chain, they are completely vulnerable to it right now. So literally they have every issue that Ethereum has in the long term, but magnitudes worse. That's not debatable. I mean, you look at the tech, it's there, it's the exact same. It's just a fork that is behind Ethereum at this point. As for speed, so I consider BSC to be sort of a subset of the Ethereum ecosystem, right? Like, part of the whole point of Ethereum is that you can do a lot of things by bridging to all these side chains. So if you want to take crazy amounts of risk on a centralized platform like BSC, you should go do that. If you want maybe a little bit more decentralized, there's stuff like Matic and Polygon and 𝐎𝐥𝐢𝐃𝐃, where they, they're still pretty centralized, but they're more decentralized than BSC. And then there's, of course, roll-ups and layer 2. And those things, of course, are faster than BSC. For instance, I use Seller's layer 2 finance, and I instantly had a transaction go through, right? So and same with rollups. I can go use a ZK rollup right now, and I might transfer the funds, and it's instant. It's all a choice, and that's what Ethereum gives you.
Excellent. And Nichols, let's hear your thoughts about speed and scalability. What's going on with BSC on this side of things?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to Ogle's point is, by the time ETH 2.0 comes around, to add on to his point, how ingrained are the communities in BSC, other side chains, and L2 is going to be? And then furthermore, and for DeFi to grow, there has to be adoption out of the people that are in DeFi right now, whether that's an ETH or Binance Smart Chain or Matic. And I feel like Binance itself is in the best position to onboard those new users. And it's obviously going to be on Binance Smart Chain. That's the market facing material that they're providing. And they see the speed and transaction costs right there. That's the first experience. I think also, even with the 2.0, I don't think you're going to match necessarily the transaction costs of side chains or something like BSC or an L2 as well. So I just think it's going to ETH, and I see this a lot from what you call ETH maxis is they're extremely worried about, is ETH 2.0 going to be too late? Are users going to be ingrained in other solutions as well? So, and maybe a ZK rollup or your, Matic or Polygon or whatever is an answer for them. But I just feel like, ETH mainnet itself runs the risk of time.
Excellent. We are going to roll right into accessibility. You've heard the thoughts about speed and scalability. Now let's get into accessibility for both chains. We've seen rapid growth in the DeFi space on both sides, Ethereum and BSC. But ultimately, what chain is better for onboarding users? Let's hand this off to Evan. Start us off on the Ethereum side.
Yeah, what is best for onboarding users? Binance, part of the way that they got so many people to use BSC was that they sort of tricked their users into using BSC. And that's not me saying that. I mean, you can literally go search, and every wallet's message board is full of complaints saying, I was tricked into using BSC, right? I mean, but you know what? Hey, if people want to use it, they should use it, and that's totally cool. BSC is cheap. It's cool to try something out. It's sort of like a centralized option of Ethereum. If you want to try it out for the first time with some ephemeral keys or whatnot that you can that you don't have to lose, because key management is a significant hurdle to getting people involved in crypto, then like BSC is a great option for that. And, actually, I would agree with something that I think Nichols said on the last one, which is that like mainnet Ethereum will always have, higher transaction costs than like a centralized sidechain, right? I mean, that is just a fact of life, because decentralization has costs, right? Like if you want the trustlessness and the censorship resistance, then, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you really want really cheap, then you should just use SQL, which is known as your bank.
Interesting thoughts. Very good. We're going to hand this over to Nichols. Which chain is better for onboarding new users, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of made the point last time, but I kind of look at Binance Smart Chain as, and these are other solutions as Polygon and so on, as more the people's chain. They're the new people that are getting into DeFi are from places where a 30-cent transaction is reasonable, but a $300 transaction is not. And I think you have to have something like that to gain mass adoption. Everybody can participate in Binance Smart Chain. Not everybody can participate on Ethereum mainnet. I wouldn't dare farm on Ethereum mainnet with less than $20,000. And that I think it's simple. I think that's a simple conversation that it's just more accessible. It's more user friendly and cost friendly to an everyday user.
Yeah. And DeFiDad, what are your thoughts about this? Go ahead. You still have time.
Yeah, sorry. And I think to Evan's point, maybe there are some risks to Binance Smart Chain, but the risk of making a bad decision with a low amount of funds on Ethereum and paying a $300 transaction fee is, to me, a greater risk. I don't believe that Binance Smart Chain is going to just stop working one day. I think that's a smaller risk than other risks that you take on in DeFi in general. That makes sense.
Yeah. DeFiDad, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this question goes back to your time frame. So part of the reason that DeFi I think has grown so rapidly on Ethereum is the fact that first off, you have better developer tooling. I think this is a truth that's everybody can agree upon, and that comes from a larger, more active developer community, and that has led to more DeFi applications and more protocols launching, which attracts more talent. And I would say like the thing that the real difference I've noticed with Ethereum-based DeFi, especially over the last 6 to 12 months, is I think we're just seeing better design. Design has become so important to the core of mass adoption for DeFi. And so, basically we're attracting that much more talent, I think, at the moment. Now, long term, I have no doubt that BSC has a number of applications like PancakeSwap. I think has some incredible design. It's just so easy to use. And so I see these are not you can't basically create and hide that innovation from others. So it'll continue to spread. But the core of that innovation, the core of the excitement, I think as a developer community still lies in Ethereum. So, anyways, I'd say right now, there's that much better tooling. I've obviously worked with Zapper the last year, and I think Zapper has, we've done about 5 billion in transaction volume. And there's a reason for that, because we just continue to work with the community that lives on Ethereum. So yeah, that's anyways why I think we've got the lead right now in terms of accessibility on Ethereum. All right.
And Ogle, what are your thoughts here in regards to accessibility for BSC versus ETH?
Yeah, it really depends on the audience. I think that DeFiDad is 100% correct. When it comes to accessibility for new developers, ETH is much more accessible. because there's a lot more helpful communities on that. There are a lot of places people can go to find information. There are lots of copy and paste the codes that that they can use and sort of get started and stuff. And I think that's fantastic. If you're a developer, it's a lot more accessible to be on the ETH side. If you're pretty much anyone else, I think that BSC is, and I think that this is clear. I mean, you have, first off, it's more accessible because you have easy on ramp. You have the ability to go just to Binance and press a button, bada bing, now you're on the BSC network, as opposed to having to find some other route. You can do it from KuCoin as well. Two is I think that the accessibility conversation is proven by looking at the transaction sizes. If you go to something like DEX Tools and you look at the last transactions on different coins, try to find on Ethereum anywhere where someone's making a $1.50 transaction, where they buy $1.50 of a coin, or $2.50 of a coin, or $5 of a coin. It's not going to happen because they pay 10 times that in the transaction cost. On the other hand, I can sit here and look at the same stuff, look at DEX Tools or any of the other number of places. I see people making 50-cent purchases, $1.50 purchases, $2 purchases, and you can't discount the fact that these are only possible because of the low fees. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. The top BSC countries, the top countries where BSC is actually used: Russia, Turkey, Nigeria, Vietnam, Brazil. These are places that don't have enormous amounts of money in general and can't afford to get onto something like that. So de facto, accessibility is clearly on the BSC side when it comes to actual uses of product.
Interesting. So we have kind of we're talking, accessibility in terms of developer side and then actually end user side. So it seems like there's kind of two angles of accessibility that we're all kind of discussing here, which is pretty fascinating because I think both bring great value for that. Now we are going to move into the next topic for tonight, the elephant in the room, Ethereum 2.0. All right, with Ethereum 2.0 lingering, what is this? What's going on with this? Is it overhyped? Is this the right direction for Ethereum? We're going to allow DeFiDad. Why don't you take this one away for us?
I was going to say, I need to let Evan lead off on this.
Okay.
He is probably the foremost expert on this. It would be a waste of not using him. So please, Evan.
Yeah, sure.
Jump in.
So ETH2 is really sort of a misnomer. We could go how it became ETH2, ETH 2.0, whatever people use. What really makes sense is to talk about what's coming on the roadmap, and what's coming on the roadmap is this 1559 that is going to burn about half of transaction fees is coming on August 4th. And then about 6 months from now, we are going to turn off proof of work and use the ETH2 staking system that has been live since December. And we're going to use that for consensus for all of Ethereum. So there's this idea that ETH2 is a separate thing, and it's not really. We're going to use Ethereum staking that we've been working on and been using in production, but in a very isolated production, and getting it ready for about 6 months from now. We've already had a bunch of prototypes. It's a relatively simple concept. Basically, we're going to hitch the quote-unquote ETH1, the mainnet client, up to the ETH2 client, which is the staking client, and then just let the two talk to each other. And instead of using proof of work mining and waste a lot of electricity, we will use staking, the staking system that's been working for the last 6 months. And then about 6 months to a year after that, we'll have rollups. We'll have more data availability for rollups on a bunch of different shards. But at the moment, we don't really need that because rollups aren't quite at capacity on mainnet.
Excellent. That's super informative because I actually didn't really know a lot of what that roadmap looked like for ETH2. So that's pretty insightful.
I could talk an hour.
I'm curious. I know. I wish I could dive a little bit deeper with that. But I do want to kind of toss this over to the BSC guys because I'm curious to hear your insights, Ogle especially. What does ETH2, from your perspective, look like, and is this the right direction? Kind of an outsider looking in to the Ethereum ecosystem.
what does ETH2 look like to me? There's actually this GIF file that I've seen in a lot of telegrams, and it shows Vitalik, and he's like 85 years old, and it's like a news thing that at the bottom it says ETH2 finally released. That's what ETH2 looks like to me. I'm sure that theoretically something interesting can come out of it. I mean that would be fantastic. But until something happens, we're really just debating dreams right now. I can talk about ETH as it is right now. I can talk about BSC as it is right now. But otherwise, we're talking about dreams. I can't argue the points that Evan made, and I can't argue what the specs claim will happen. And if they do happen, that's fantastic. I mean, look, I use ETH myself. I'm not going to say I don't, because I do. That's where I started off at. Like I said earlier, I still use it today for certain things. There are a lot of good reasons to use ETH, but for the regular user and just in general, I think that BSC is the better place to be, and that's what we're debating, really.
Sure. And DeFiDad, we're going to toss this over to you. We've been talking about ETH2 for a while. Is it overhyped? And in your opinion, is this the right direction of where the next evolution of Ethereum, the blockchain, should go? Yeah,
my response is going to be super short. ETH
Sure.
2.0 is really been more of just like some bad framing, some bad marketing over the last years. ETH 2.0 was always going to take so much more time. And the problem is, if you're not tuned in to everything that Evan just mentioned, which is a lot to take in, I would recommend there's some incredible podcasts from ETH Hub that you can learn all about ETH 2.0. But long story short, we really are that close. It's just that now, I will say personally, I just look forward to seeing this all roll out. I've tried to avoid, telling people, oh, it's this much closer, but it really is. It's finally here. And the biggest win in the past year, of course, has been the Beacon chain launching and having the staking go live, because we can watch that number tick upwards of validators on Ethereum. And I think we're around like $12 billion now, like about 6 million Ether is staked. So we're about to get there. That being said, one final point, kind of going back to the last bit about accessibility, is at the end of the day, I look to DeFi protocols to launch liquidity on as many chains as they see fit, as the community votes and sees fit, and just let the users decide. And that's been one of the cool things, is to see, like, there's been a number of projects I love on Ethereum that decided to launch on BSC. Working at Zapper, we decided to support BSC. And because we, at the end of the day, said the users need to be able to make their own choices. And I think we're seeing that on the opposite end, where you will start to see projects that launched originally on BSC that will launch on Ethereum. And I'm very interested to see what users do as those options become available.
Yeah, definitely. And Nicholas, what are your thoughts here in regards to the direction of ETH 2.0?
Yeah, I agree with DeFiDad. I actually read an article. I don't remember who wrote it. I can retweet it today. But the idea of projects being multi-chain and letting the users decide. And the article also talked about when ETH 2.0 comes out, is anybody going to care? It could be the greatest solution, but is it not going to come out, in 6 or a year or 2 years? Is anybody going to care by then? Because they can basically use their favorite DeFi platform on their preferred chain, whatever is convenient to them. So, has ETH 2.0 kind of lost its splash, and is not going to create as big as an impact as everyone hopes it will.
Interesting.
Hey, Nichols,
very
you're
good.
not going to deploy on Cardano, though, right? We're pretty sure.
No, hell no. No, I mean,
I don't know any projects on Cardano. We're all in agreement about that. We'll be on ETH 10.0 before Cardano has any apps.
Totally
Shots fired. No, all right, guys.
There,
we're going to shift this over.
There won't be a BSC ETH versus Cardano debate.
Right.
We'll get on this at that point. It'll be BSC plus Ethereum.
Exactly. All right, guys, we're going to shift over to our next topic tonight is BSC validators. As we touched on earlier, the biggest differences between chains is the amount of validators. With BSC being a little bit more centralized and having only 21 validators versus now thousands upon validators on the Ethereum side, what is the most secure form of the blockchain in regards to proof of authority versus proof of stake or proof of work? Spitting Nichols, we're going to start off with you on the BSC side.
As DeFiDad deferred to Evan, I'm going to defer to Ogle on this one. So he is my validator.
Not allowed. He's breaking rules. Disqualified.
All right, Ogle, jump in here for us. Let's handle this. Let's see what BSC. Why is each chain more secure, or what's the argument for proof of authority versus proof of stake?
Okay, so consensus is a little bit slightly different conversation than the validator topic as for what I'm going to say. But I'll say that, okay, so there's this position that because there's 21 validators that there's that basically like they're all owned by CZ, and he can just call up the hallway and tell people, hey, Terry, do this thing, roll it back, or whatever the case may be. I've seen this over and over and over again, and it's just nonsensical. I mean, it's just not the case. And I can tell you this from experience. My group, BSC Gemz, we had enough BNB together back in January, which was about 104,000 BNB, to have our own validator and be in the top 21 at that point. Right now, it's over 500,000 BNB required to do that. But at that point, we had the ability to do that. Now, to be fair, in order to be a validator on the BSC side, it does require approval from the Binance crew, or the BSC crew. Actually, I'm not sure if it's the BSC crew or the Binance crew, but it requires approval. And I think there's good and bad to that. The bad is what they'll point out in a minute, so I'll point out the good. The good side of that is basically you do have this ability to have a filtering mechanism such that someone ultra wealthy can't come in and take over all the validators or several of the validators, and then start to screw with the transactions the way that has been the case in some other chains. And so I don't really see this as quite the issue that some other people do, but I do see it definitely as a form of centralization. And for those who might be much more concerned about decentralization versus centralization, I'll concede the point. I'll gladly concede the point that in this aspect, ETH is certainly more decentralized and in some ways safer.
Okay.
Well, you already conceded the point, which is that somebody can already come in and take it over because it's already been taken over. So I actually looked into BSC's architecture to prepare for this call, and so one interesting thing that I learned is that Binance Smart Chain is actually a side chain of Binance Chain, which I think not a lot of people know. So there are 21 validators on Binance Smart Chain, but so basically Binance Chain, which is a Tendermint chain, it has 11 validators, which are, I think, entirely run by Binance. I think the 21 on BSC are a little bit more, I think they might be like Binance, friends of Binance, but not just Binance flat out. I believe the Binance chain is actually, just flat out run by Binance. And there are 11 validators, and every day they choose the 21 BSC validators for the next day. So, and I looked at the tech stack as well. There's, it's a pretty rickety tech stack. Like there's some oracles which are also controlled. There's quite a few points of failure. I think that sort of makes sense why we've seen some very deep reorgs, despite the fact that it's centralized and there's not many validators, and how difficult it is to run a node, of course, and that's only going to get worse. But I don't think Ogle and I really disagree on this all that much, right? Which is like it's centralized, and as long as users know about that, then that's a reasonable thing to choose.
And Ogle, do you want to rebut that, or Nicholas, do you want to jump in and maybe talk more about the centralization of BSC?
Well, one thing that I'll say, if you don't mind, just for 1 second, just in terms of who owns the validators, because it is a point that's brought up a lot. if you look at the validator list on BSC Scan, for example, you can see who owns these, because usually they're kind of advertisements in a certain sense. The number one, the last time I checked, was owned by BSC Scan. One of them was BNB 48, which is basically a club of, like a DAO, basically, of people who just have a bunch of BNB. Cream, which is a project that a lot of people are familiar with, that's one of the top ones. They just take all the BNB that's in there and they use that to vote to be a validator. And so, these aren't projects or groups that CZ or someone else can call up and say, hey, let's do this all together. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. The approval mechanism is to make sure they're not malicious. It's not to make sure they agree with, with what CZ, how he sees the world. It's not like a test. There's not some kind of litmus test you have to go through to become approved. I just want to be clear about it.
Yeah. Well, does that ultimately go ahead?
I do want to say, though, I mean, it is a side chain of Binance's chain, right? So there are 11 validators that choose every day the 21 on BSC. So given how much, Binance owns of the BNB supply, it is, they do control who is the validators on BSC. I mean, I think this is probably a small point, but it is worth making.
And I will agree with Evan that theoretically that is the case. I'm not sure that actually occurs. I don't have any proof that occurs, but there is a theoretical risk there that is worth paying attention to. And I agree with him about that.
I can cap off this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the best part about this conversation is that it's being informative and truthful. So the point of the debate is ultimately which chain is better, or which one should you ultimately use. And I would argue this is one of those points actually that I don't think matters much to any users, because I think you've already made your decision by the time you get this deep, down the rabbit hole. You've already chosen Ethereum for decentralization, security, XYZ, whatever, or you've chosen BSC because you need to be able to transact with $10 or less and pay, a few cents per transaction, or you're, as Ogle pointed out, I love the fact that BSC is reaching users in parts of the world who desperately need access to alternative finance. So yeah, I think my main point here is it's so important to understand these differences. I wish everyone would. I think the truth is probably less than 5-10% of users, unless they watch tonight, will. And that's it. If you're gonna, people need to be truthful about it. And there's one person that bothers me who I think is somewhat misleading at times, and that is CZ. That's the one of the few things about him that bothers me, is I think he sort of paints it as apples to apples, as opposed to, again, I think how forthcoming this conversation about the differences are.
Benton, is it possible if I can have just 20 seconds, just really quick? I want to make one clarity.
No, you're not allowed.
No. Come on, please.
So both sides had their statements. We had Ethereum guys make their last word there. We are going to shift over to I'll give you a deal, though.
Let Ogle go. He just 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think let's hear from Ogle.
All right. We'll give you 20 seconds here.
Thank you so much. And thank you. And it's actually not even an argument. I just want to make a kind of a question here. So my understanding, Evan said that there are 11 validators on Binance chain that basically choose the validators for BSC. That's not my understanding. My understanding is that the BSC validators are based on just the top number of staked BNB. So if possible, Evan, if you don't mind tweeting the information about that afterward, I would just like to see it because it's just totally different than what my understanding is. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, we're going to roll into the next topic here. It is consensus mechanisms, which we're going to kind of fold into a little bit more here and touch more on kind of the validators and stuff. So let's jump right in. And this will give us our chance to kind of segue and maybe rehash some of the topics we were just talking about. With Ethereum being proof of work, as we just touched on, currently shifting over to proof of stake, and Binance Smart Chain being proof of authority. Does this compromise network integrity? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit. And then would this provide a stopgap for scammers at all? Ogle, do you want to start us off and kick this one off?
Let Evan start this one.
Sure.
Since we got extra 20 seconds, we'll let him go first.
Okay, Evan.
Yeah, and I'm actually I'm having a connection problem. I'm actually going to have to reconnect, guys. So Evan or Nichols or DeFiDad, I'll be just right back. Please go ahead.
Evan, feel free to jump in here, man.
So I said it, but I think I was talking over someone. I'm sorry. I wasn't listening to the question because it was their turn to talk.
I see. So we're going to be talking about how is their network compromising the integrity of the network by being proof of authority versus proof of stake? And does this provide a stopgap for scammers?
Yeah, I mean, compromised, it's centralized. I think it depends on, what your threat model is. And I think we've talked about that a lot so far on this call. Does it provide a stopgap for scammers? I think that Binance has stepped in and stopped some of the scams early on. But like I said earlier, I think that no longer do they do that because there's some bridges and, although it's centralized, they manage, it's not fast enough. And so people can literally programmatically get it in the next block. And, once it's into that bridge, it's basically good enough for that. I'm not really an expert on any of those bridges or anything like that. But my understanding is that the hackers, which, at this point, I think we're up, north of $1 billion over BSC hacks in the past couple of months, or maybe it's $500 million. I'm not sure. I think they've all basically gotten away with it and bridged off the chain. So, yeah, like I said, to me, there's in some ways there is the disadvantages of centralization and the disadvantages of decentralization.
Excellent point. Nicholas, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, to kind of clarify my point earlier about that. So in the past, I think I may have misled you down the wrong path of, Binance, stopped a transaction on Binance Smart Chain itself. That was generally done through, third-party communication with, perhaps another bridge, or even at the the centralized exchange level of, a user sending funds to Binance.com and freezing funds there. So it's not like they've interjected into the blockchain itself, the transactions itself. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of clarify that it's more of a cooperation between different projects, which has kind of went down the wayside with bridges like AnySwap and a couple other more decentralized bridges that aren't willing to cooperate in that manner. That's extremely unfortunate, and it's led to more scams on BSC than there was in the past, and I hope that cooperation comes back. That's what I'm hoping myself, because that was a major appeal to Binance Smart Chain for some users, and especially new users. As far as consensus mechanisms, I don't, I won't get technical in it, but I don't think the average user really either doesn't know the differences or doesn't care because they've accepted that risk on the chain that they're operating. So I don't see that as a very important thing for the average DeFi user in the worlds that I play in, at least.
Yeah, DeFiDad, your go.
I accept. Sorry, I pause and then So I accept that risk. That in my book, that's a low risk versus other risks of interacting with smart contracts and so on. And I think the focus of BSC has been to educate the community on how to further advance their knowledge in reading smart contracts and interacting with them and so on. That's like baby step one of the new DeFi process for a new user. So
yeah, and DeFiDad, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah. This isn't. I kind of meant to pair this with even the last point we discussed with BSC validators. This falls into a category that users don't generally know about or care about. But I also, I because we're getting near the end here, as like I've definitely learned a few things here today, more about BSC. I've actually learned a little bit more too from Evan, just about Ethereum, things that I wasn't even aware of. And I just keep being reminded that like, you know, whatever differences there are between Ethereum, BSC, Phantom, Polygon, you know, Cosmos, these are alternatives to the legacy system. The problem is the legacy system. The legacy system needs to be burned to the ground, and it needs to be rebuilt using what we've got here. And I do think, like, going back to, I guess, this original question about the proof of authority versus proof of stake, I will say, like, the reason that I, of course, bet on Ethereum with proof of stake is that my worry is that DeFi will just end up turning into like a Frankenstein sort of thing of what it was supposed to be, but looking more like legacy finance, because regulators, you know, those who run the governments and hold us, you know, accountable in the countries we live in, those people are going to be threatened. And I'm very worried that without the most censorship-resistant decentralized network, that we're at risk of we're you know, threatened by these people. And so that's where, like, these sort of stopgaps we've talked about, but, you know, with BSC, those concern me only because of those enemies out there. And like, if we're all on the same side of the fence, it's those people that concern me. So anyways, that's why I sleep I sleep better at night with my money on Ethereum.
Very good. And Ogle, close us out here with your thoughts about consensus mechanisms, BSC versus ETH.
Yeah, and as a regular user, you know, a very knowledgeable user, I can see why DeFiDad might sleep better on Ethereum. I can tell you the people that don't really sleep better on Ethereum, and that would be, for example, someone who owns a hedge fund, or someone who is a family office manager, a private equity manager. They're not going to be able to sleep, because if there's a totally decentralized network with no chance of the ability to get their money back in the case of an exploit or a rug, then they're probably illegally breaching their fiduciary duties to their clients. They're probably introducing a level of risk that could get them in trouble for malpractice. And so I think that depending upon who you are and what your uses are, as we've said multiple times here, the chains have different advantages. But I think that when it comes to mass adoption of regular everyday not wealthy people, BSC wins. I think when it comes to mass adoption of very large institutional or money managing type of situations, BSC makes more sense. I think that in the middle there, which is wealthy private individuals, I think that Ethereum wins that one probably.
Okay, hey, Ben,
very good.
10-second point.
10 seconds.
Ogle makes a really interesting point I hadn't thought about, and I think it kind of reinforces my concern. Is I want DeFi to truly be to not be controlled by the governments of the world. I want it to be, you know, a self-sovereign sort of alternative peer-to-peer finance system. So I do see the point, Ogle, and it kind of scares me, like, what could happen beyond that. But I think we'll find out, because they're going to coexist.
Living up to your name.
Hey, yeah, that's all right. DeFiDad, man.
I rented some kids from Amazon. Just
good marketing.
Yeah.
He's doxxed.
No, that's
he has a dad.
We real quick, I want to jump in here. We do have a poll tonight on Cointelegraph's Twitter. Go vote. And this was a friendly debate tonight. This turned out to be a great, informative debate between both sides. But we want to hear your voices. Let's see, you know, who you thought made some of the better points, and maybe one of the chains that you learned more about tonight. Cast your vote, BSC versus ETH. You have 5 minutes to go do that. Right now, we are going to move into our closing remarks. So I'm going to start this off with the BSC side. Nichols, give us your closing remarks. What were some of your biggest takeaways and thoughts after kind of being able to talk with Evan, DeFiDad, Ogle? Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, great discussion. I didn't expect it to be terrible, you know, combative. You know, everybody's good people, you know, when we're speaking to the community. I think we need to look at, and maybe this is a tip more or less for the ETH community is we need to look at, what the users outside of DeFi right now, what are they looking for? What are their needs specifically? Not only in the US or the UK or more wealthy areas, but the entire globe, and I don't think, high transaction costs and super decentralized blockchain is stuff that is, one, transaction costs aren't desired, obviously, and massive decentralization I don't think is big on their list of requirements for decentralized finance or DeFi. I think ETH loses sight of trying to create this perfect thing, in this bubble, and not looking at what the mass adoption of what people are going to use this thing in this bubble. What are their needs and what matters most to them.
DeFiDad, let's hear you.
I think you see, with CZ, he very much saw that with Binance Smart Chain. He knew what the people wanted.
Yeah. DeFiDad, give us your closing thoughts here. What was kind of some of your biggest takeaways, and what would you like the world to know about Ethereum?
Yeah, I know I strike a very kumbaya vibe with all of this, but I am always surprised. I've talked with a lot of founders of BSC projects, and I really I think it's important to keep a pulse and actually to try applications on BSC, whether or not I choose to keep my money in it. I am just simply reminded that the enemy is not in the room. The enemy is out there, and the enemy is legacy finance. And I don't mean to say that they're evil people and we need to absolutely nuke them out of existence, but 20, 30 years from now, I really do believe that the majority of the world is going to be transacting in crypto asset networks, and so I think that Ethereum turns out to be the largest island in that mix. But one of the cool things I'm enjoying about BSC and Ethereum right now is that there's a lot of, if you were going to A/B test, do people care about decentralization security? Do they just want fast transactions, cheaper costs? It's very interesting because you get to kind of watch BSC running alongside Ethereum, and even the tooling, you can use MetaMask on either one. So, long term, that's the thing, is long term, I just wonder, what happens, if Evan and I are correct and ETH 2.0 delivers here finally, and now we reach parity in some of these killer features that users do love about BSC. What happens then? I guess we'll come to find out. I have a very tough time believing that people will just abandon BSC, just like if ETH 2.0, technically, if it never delivered, it will, but if it never did, people aren't just going to abandon Ethereum. And so that's why I see them growing and continuing to coexist. I'm excited for the ride. We're gonna build the future.
Very good. Ogle, let's hear your closing thoughts and arguments.
Yeah. I just want to say thanks a lot to DeFiDad and Evan for being cool today during this. Ben, you've done a fantastic job moderating, and Nichols, of course, is the absolute GOAT over here. And so I just want to say first off, thanks, and it's good to meet those of you I didn't know beforehand. Look, Ethereum is amazing. There's no doubt about it. The group of people that worked on it for the past 5 or 6 years, actually more than that now, to create it, and they have worked on all of the different developments that have happened and continue to happen. They're fantastic. I mean, these are real geniuses that are helping to create the future of certain infrastructures. I also think the people working on BSC are amazing, and I think that the folks working on BSC, not just Binance itself, but the folks developing itself, although they might not be as polished as someone earlier said, they might not be as beautiful in some cases as someone else said earlier, they are still working very hard, learning a lot, and becoming, really the builders of tomorrow for their communities and for the BSC community itself. So I'm stoked about that. I grew up in a very disadvantaged situation, And so I have a very, clearly have a bias toward people who don't have a lot getting access and the ability to bring themselves up to better their lives. And I think that BSC provides that. It's something that Ethereum right now, simply because of the fees, it just doesn't allow that to happen. And so for that reason, even if nothing else existed, for that reason alone, I think that BSC is clearly the better chain for just the average person.
All right. And Evan, let's hear your closing thoughts and arguments.
So once upon a time, I was in a chat group for stablecoin OTC trading for Argentines. And this was, maybe a year ago now. And I realized quickly that they were, first of all, they were often trading Tether, which has some of its problems, opaque backing. And they were often doing it on chains which I consider to be scams, frankly, much worse than BSC, which is relatively honest about its centralization. And this bothered me for a little bit, but at the same time, if you're literally just cashing out really quick, it actually serves the purpose, right? And these people were not leaving their money in for a long period of time, and this chain in particular worked for the use case. I think the same is true for BSC. I think they're if you really want low transaction fees, you should consider using centralized sidechains, especially if there's rates that are worth the reward, the rewards that are worth the risk. However, personally, I got into crypto because, centralization is power, and power corrupts. So I think we need to decentralize everything. So, to the greatest extent possible. And so that's why I'm in Ethereum, and that's why I will continue to keep my money in Ethereum and not BSC. I think that a lot of BSC users will eventually, move money that they want to be sure is outside of the reach of a government or a corporation. They'll eventually, move it back to Ethereum.
Yes. Awesome debate and super insightful. Like I mentioned earlier, I've learned so much just hearing some of the most brilliant minds on both sides of Ethereum and BSC tonight. I do want to bring up our poll ended. We thank you all for joining, and all those that have watched through this evening. Thank you. And until next time, we appreciate everybody.